Commander HFY of the Valorian Empire crouched behind crystalline outcroppings on Terra 3's barren surface, his plasma rifle humming with deadly energy. The pre-dawn darkness concealed his 12-member strike team as they encircled the primitive human settlement, a collection of prefabricated domes and research stations that wouldn't have impressed a Valorian child. Pathetic, he muttered, watching the bipedal creatures through his targeting scope. Intelligence reports classified them as barely spacefaring, their crude chemical rockets and fusion reactors marking them as centuries behind Valorian technology. This extermination mission would be over before his morning meal. Remember, HFY's mandibles clicked through encrypted comms to his team. Imperial Xenobiology Division wants tissue samples. These mammals reproduce exponentially. Today, we prevent tomorrow's infestation. Clean kills, minimal vaporization. His rifle's power cell glowed brighter as he increased the setting to maximum lethality. The plasma bolts would punch through their flimsy environmental suits like paper, flash-cooking their primitive nervous systems before they could even register pain. He'd done this to 17 species across the Outer Rim. Humans would be number 18. All units, commence extermination protocol, he commanded. The synchronized volley lit up the settlement like a miniature star going nova. 12 plasma rifles fired simultaneously, their coherent energy beams designed to vaporize Krillian battle armor, striking the unsuspecting humans with devastating precision. The night air filled with the acrid smell of superheated atmosphere and the distinctive ozone crackle of energy weapons. HFY lowered his rifle, already calculating the mission duration for his report. But instead of the expected silence of successful termination, he heard something that made his exoskeleton crawl with primordial dread. Laughter. Through the dissipating smoke and energy discharge, a human female emerged from the largest dome. Her clothing was singed and smoking, but her pale skin showed only mild reddening, like a minor thermal burn. She examined the plasma impact site on her forearm with scientific curiosity rather than the death throes he expected. "Well, that was interesting," she said in surprisingly fluent galactic standard, flexing her fingers experimentally. "Felt like a really aggressive sun lamp. Mind trying that again?" HFY's 4 compound eyes dilated in absolute disbelief. In 3 millennia of galactic conquest, nothing, absolutely nothing, had ever survived direct plasma exposure. The weapons he carried could melt through starship hulls. What were these creatures? Dr. Sarah Chen's xenobiology training had prepared her for alien pathogens, atmospheric toxins, and exotic radiation exposure, but nothing in the colonial medical protocols covered surviving direct energy weapon hits. As the plasma discharge faded from her retinas, her analytical mind processed the impossible. She was alive, conscious, and experiencing only moderate discomfort. The alien weapon's impact had felt like stepping too close to a fusion reactor's exhaust port, intense heat that should have flash vaporized her cellular structure. Instead, her skin showed only the reddened irritation of a bad solar barn. More disturbing still, the sensation was already fading. "Sarah!" Dr. Marcus Webb's voice cracked with panic as he scrambled behind an overturned atmospheric processor. "What the hell is happening to us? Johnson took a direct hit and he's still breathing." Across the settlement, other colonists were emerging from cover with expressions of bewildered shock. Mining engineer Patricia Vance stared at the smoking hole in her jumpsuit where a plasma bolt had struck her shoulder. Beneath the melted fabric, her skin was merely pink and warm to the touch. "Look at your arm," Sarah called to Marcus, pressing herself against a concrete barrier as another coordinated volley lit up their position. "Where the first beam hit you." Marcus examined his forearm where a glancing blow had torn through his sleeve. The expected third-degree burn was already healing, angry red tissue fading to a peculiar metallic sheen that seemed to shimmer with residual energy patterns. "This violates every principle of thermodynamics," he whispered, flexing his fingers experimentally. "Plasma weapons operate at 15,000 degrees Celsius. We should be vapor clouds by now." A third plasma bolt struck Sarah's center mass, the coherent energy beam designed to punch through military-grade body armor. The impact spun her around, but instead of the searing agony of cellular destruction, she felt something extraordinary, a warm, almost pleasant tingling as her body somehow absorbed and processed the lethal energy. Her skin remained unmarked. If anything, she felt stronger. "Commander Zexhai!" The alien's frustrated voice echoed across the settlement through external speakers. "Increase power settings! Maximum yield!" But Sarah Chen was no longer afraid. Something fundamental was changing in her physiology, her cells restructuring themselves in real time, learning to metabolize energy that should have killed her instantly. Each successive hit made her body more efficient at the impossible process. She stood slowly, facing the alien positions with newfound confidence. "Not impossible, Marcus," she said, watching energy patterns dance beneath her skin. "Just unprecedented." The Valorian strike team had maintained continuous fire for 3 hours and 17 minutes. Their plasma rifles' power cells, designed for extended military operations, were dropping to critical levels. What had begun as a routine extermination mission had devolved into a nightmare scenario that violated every tactical doctrine in the Imperial Manual. Sub-Commander Kethris watched through his targeting scope as a human male, previously cowering behind a collapsed atmospheric dome, now walked casually through overlapping fields of laser fire. The coherent energy beams that should have reduced him to component atoms simply disappeared into his skin, absorbed like rainwater into parched earth. "Commander Zexhai," Kethris hissed through encrypted comms, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "We need immediate evacuation. These creatures aren't just surviving, they're thriving on our weapons discharge." Zexhai's mandibles clicked in frustrated denial. "Impossible! No biological organism can process that level of energy input. Their cellular structure should have collapsed hours ago." But the evidence was undeniable. The human's eyes had developed an ethereal luminescence, glowing with internalized energy patterns. Crackling discharges played across his fingertips like tame lightning, and his skin had taken on the metallic sheen that seemed to be spreading among all their targets. Dr. Sarah Chen stood at the settlement center, no longer taking cover from their attacks. Her body shimmered with a constant aurora of absorbed energy, and when she moved, after-images of pure light traced her path. She was studying readouts on a damaged scanner, apparently analyzing her own physiological transformation in real time. "Fascinating," she called out in perfect galactic standard, her voice now carrying harmonic frequencies that made Zexhai's exoskeleton vibrate. "Our cellular mitochondria are restructuring themselves into something completely new. Bioelectric conversion efficiency is approaching theoretical maximums." Marcus Webb approached her position, his own transformation even more pronounced. The mining engineer's muscular frame now seemed to contain barely contained energy, and when he gestured, reality seemed to bend slightly around his hands. "Sarah, I think we need to capture one of them alive," he said, his words carrying subsonic resonances that the alien's translation matrices struggled to interpret. "If we're evolving this rapidly, we need to understand the process." Dr. Chen smiled, and starlight seemed to dance behind her transformed eyes. "I think I can arrange that." She raised her hand toward the Valorian positions and for the first time released a portion of the energy she'd been accumulating. The directed beam struck Commander Zexhai's rifle, melting the advanced alloy weapon into slag in milliseconds. The hunters had become the hunted. The makeshift detention facility had been hastily constructed from salvaged atmospheric processors and reinforced with human-modified energy containment fields. Commander Zexhai found himself stripped of his ceremonial armor and advanced weaponry, bound with crude but effective human metal alloys that somehow resisted his exoskeleton's considerable strength. Across from him sat Dr. Sarah Chen, though calling her human now seemed inadequate. Her transformation had accelerated beyond anything in xenobiological literature: skin that shimmered with constantly shifting energy patterns, eyes that held depths of swirling luminescence, and a presence that made his primitive predator instincts scream warnings. "Your species has provided us with invaluable data," she said, her voice carrying multiple harmonic layers that his translators struggled to parse. "In just 18 hours, we've achieved what should have taken millions of years of evolutionary pressure." The detention chamber's walls bore scorch marks from testing sessions, humans experimenting with their newfound abilities on various materials. Energy discharge patterns suggested they were learning to focus and direct their absorbed power with increasing precision. "You're abominations," Zexhai spat, his mandibles clicking in disgust. "This violates every principle of natural selection, every law of thermodynamic equilibrium." Marcus Webb materialized through the wall, not walking through a door, but converting himself to energy and reconstituting on the other side. His laugh carried the sound of controlled lightning discharge. "Evolution? Commander, you compressed 10 million years of adaptive pressure into a single day. Our bodies didn't have time for gradual change. They had to transform or die." Dr. Chen leaned forward, and Zexhai could see the energy patterns flowing beneath her skin like living neural networks. "Tell me about your Empire's fleet composition. How many dreadnoughts? What's your standard energy weapon yield?" "Imperial secrets die with me, human abomination." She sighed with what might have been disappointment and gestured to Marcus, who placed his palm against a portable fusion cell. Within seconds, the device was completely drained, its energy content absorbed into his transformed physiology. His body blazed brighter, and he approached Zexhai's restraints. "We've discovered something interesting about bioelectric fields," Marcus said conversationally, touching the alien's exoskeleton. Zexhai convulsed as carefully controlled electrical current coursed through his nervous system, not lethal but unmistakably persuasive. "We're not inherently cruel," Dr. Chen continued, her tone remaining professionally detached. "But you initiated first contact with genocide. You've created something the galaxy has never encountered, humans who metabolize your civilization's greatest weapons." She stood, her transformed presence filling the chamber. "What do you want to know?" Zexhai whispered, his resistance crumbling. "Everything," she smiled, "starting with your fleet's current location." Admiral Korthmar commanded the Valorian Empire's most devastating battle fleet from the bridge of his flagship Eternal Dominion, a 12-kilometer dreadnought bristling with enough energy weapons to sterilize entire star systems. 300 vessels of varying classifications surrounded him in perfect formation. Heavy cruisers armed with antimatter cannons, destroyer squadrons equipped with plasma lance arrays, and support frigates carrying fusion torpedo complements. The loss of Commander Zexhai's strike team had been troubling. 12 elite soldiers vanishing on a primitive world populated by barely spacefaring mammals. But surely a few dozen colonists couldn't stand against the accumulated firepower of the Empire's finest battle group. "All vessels, assume planet cracker formation," Korthmar commanded, his four arms manipulating the tactical display with practiced efficiency. "Prepare synchronized bombardment. We will reduce Terra 3 to its component atoms and cauterize this infection before it spreads." As the fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the system's edge, Korthmar's tactical officers immediately began reporting anomalous readings. Terra 3 pulsed with energy signatures that defied classification. Not the familiar electromagnetic patterns of technology, but something organic, alive, and impossibly vast. "Admiral!" His sensor operator's voice carried an edge of disbelief, detecting massive power emanations from the planetary surface. Energy output exceeds our entire fleet's reactor capacity by a factor of 12. But what truly shattered Korthmar's confidence was what rose from the planet itself. Not ships or defensive satellites, but humans. Dozens of them ascending through the atmosphere without environmental suits, their transformed bodies wreathed in coronas of barely contained energy. They flew through hard vacuum as easily as swimming through water, their forms shifting and flowing like living plasma. As they approached the fleet, proximity sensors registered energy readings that should have been impossible for organic creatures to generate or contain. Dr. Sarah Chen materialized at the center of the formation, her presence somehow broadcasting directly to every ship's communication array despite having no visible transmitter technology. Her transformed appearance was both beautiful and terrifying, humanoid but transcendent, crackling with power that bent space-time around her. Admiral Korthmar. Her voice resonated through every hull in the fleet simultaneously. "We've been expecting you." She floated serenely before his massive dreadnought, appearing impossibly fragile against the vessel's armored bulk. But the energy readings told a different story. Her body was drawing power from somewhere, acting as a conduit for forces that could tear apart molecular bonds. "We know why you've come," she continued, and starlight seemed to dance in her transformed eyes. "The same reason your advance team came, to destroy us before we become a threat." Her smile was radiant and terrible. "I'm afraid you're several hours too late for that." "All ships!" Korthmar screamed, panic overriding 3 centuries of military discipline. "Emergency bombardment! Fire everything!" The transformation that followed defied every principle of known physics and evolutionary biology. As the combined might of 300 Valorian warships poured into them, enough concentrated energy to crack planetary crusts and boil away atmospheres, the humans didn't merely survive the bombardment, they transcended it. Dr. Sarah Chen felt her consciousness expand exponentially as antimatter streams, plasma torrents, and fusion cascades converged on her position. Her nervous system, already restructured by previous encounters, grew to accommodate the massive energy influx. Neural pathways multiplied and interconnected in impossible configurations, creating processing capacity that exceeded most shipboard artificial intelligences. "More," she whispered, her voice somehow carrying across vacuum to reach her fellow colonists. "We need so much more." Marcus Webb had become something magnificent and terrible, his human form flowing between states of matter, reaching out with tendrils of coherent energy to caress the hulls of nearby Valorian vessels. Where his transformed essence made contact, the ship's fusion reactors began hemorrhaging power directly into his expanding consciousness. He was learning to feed on the very essence of technological civilization. The fleet's weapon systems fell silent one by one as their energy cores were systematically drained. Emergency klaxons wailed across hundreds of ships as power grids collapsed, life support systems flickered, and artificial gravity generators failed. Admiral Korthmar watched his tactical displays go dark in sequence, each extinguished light representing another vessel rendered completely powerless. "Impossible!" he raged, striking his command console with all 4 fists. "Retreat! Emergency hyperspace jump! Abandon formation!" But even the navigation computers were dying as the humans drained everything: weapons batteries, engine cores, communication arrays, even the bioelectric patterns in the crew's nervous systems. The mighty Valorian fleet, masters of energy warfare for 3 millennia, found themselves helpless as infants before creatures that consumed their technology's fundamental power source. Dr. Chen materialized on Korthmar's bridge, not through teleportation, but by converting her enhanced molecular structure to pure energy and reconstituting it elsewhere. Her form barely resembled her original human appearance. She had become a confluence of living starlight wrapped in vaguely humanoid configuration. "Your weapons were quite educational," she said, her voice resonating through the ship's metal superstructure itself. "Each discharge taught us something new about energy conversion and storage." She gestured casually, and every Valorian on the bridge collapsed as she drained the bioelectric potential from their neural networks, leaving them conscious but completely paralyzed. "We know about your empire now," she continued, accessing the ship's central databases through direct molecular interface. 47 worlds, all dependent on energy-based defense systems, all completely vulnerable to what you've helped us become. She turned toward the viewport, her luminous form casting impossible shadows. "We were content with our small research colony, you know, to study the universe gradually, as evolution intended." Her gaze returned to the helpless admiral. "But you taught us a much faster way to grow." 6 standard months after the Valorian fleet's annihilation, the Galactic Council convened the most critical emergency session in recorded history on Axis Prime, the neutral world that had served as a diplomatic nexus for over 2 millennia. Representatives from 200 species filled the massive crystalline amphitheater, their various atmospheric requirements creating a complex patchwork of environmental bubbles and breathing apparatus. The agenda contained only one item, the entity classification crisis that had fundamentally shattered every assumption about galactic power structures. Representatives from 200 species filled the massive crystalline amphitheater, their various atmospheric requirements creating a complex patchwork of environmental bubbles and breathing apparatus. The agenda contained only one item, the entity classification crisis that had fundamentally shattered every assumption about galactic power structures. Representatives from 200 species filled the massive crystalline amphitheater, their various atmospheric requirements creating a complex patchwork of environmental bubbles and breathing apparatus. The agenda contained only one item, the entity classification crisis that had fundamentally shattered every assumption about galactic power structures. Representatives from 200 species filled the massive crystalline amphitheater, their various atmospheric requirements creating a complex patchwork of environmental bubbles and breathing apparatus. The agenda contained only one item, the entity classification crisis that had fundamentally shattered every assumption about galactic power structures. Representatives from 200 species filled the massive crystalline amphitheater, their various atmospheric requirements creating a complex patchwork of environmental bubbles and breathing apparatus. The agenda contained only one item, the entity classification crisis that had fundamentally shattered every assumption about galactic power structures. Representatives from 200 species filled the massive crystalline amphitheater, their various atmospheric requirements creating a complex patchwork of environmental bubbles and breathing apparatus. The agenda, diplomatic engagement. The chamber fell into absolute silence. Warfare had been the galaxy's primary conflict resolution method for eons. The concept of negotiating with entities that grew stronger from attack seemed fundamentally impossible. In the amphitheater's corner, barely visible until she chose to manifest, a figure materialized from pure energy, Dr. Sarah Chen, though her current form transcended any recognizable biological classification. She appeared as a confluence of controlled starlight wearing vaguely humanoid configuration, her presence warping local space-time enough to trigger the chamber's gravitational sensors. "Diplomacy would demonstrate wisdom," she said, her voice somehow reaching every species' auditory organs despite the incompatible atmospheric mediums. "We harbor no territorial ambitions toward those who respect our sovereignty." "And if we choose otherwise?" challenged War Chief Gorthok of the Kytheran Dominion, his warrior's pride overriding survival instinct. Dr. Chen's form blazed momentarily like a miniature supernova, energy patterns dancing through dimensions that most species couldn't perceive. "Then, you'll provide us with fascinating data about your weapons technology. We're perpetually eager to learn new applications." She began converting back to energy, her molecular structure dispersing into quantum foam. Remember, every attack teaches us something valuable about your military capabilities, and we have such excellent retention. As she vanished completely, leaving only ionized atmosphere and the faint scent of ozone, the Galactic Council faced an unprecedented realization. The age of energy-based warfare had ended forever. Humanity had evolved beyond conquest through superior firepower. They had achieved something far more terrifying: immunity to destruction itself.